Okay, so we're back, finishing off, just slightly running over the last one, so thought I'd put it in another video. Um, all we're doing here is just putting a bit more depth into these tabs. I quite like the sharpness of this, but if you're a fan of the softer drop shadows or you want that to contrast that sharpness against the softness, you may want to modify it a little bit. So I'm going to move to the main page with its tab, left tab, that's this page area here, because there I can see it in more detail. And I'm going to double click to bring up the layer style dialog now. Difficult to fit this on screen without obstructing what we're trying to look at. I'm going to go down to drop shadow and just select a drop shadow. Okay, by default it'll be pretty big, pretty intense, so I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to pick this color and actually pick the shadow color from the document rather than black. I might even knock back a little bit the shadow settings so that it's subtler. I don't want it too strong, too harsh. I'm going to increase just slightly the size and distance. Not the distance, so I want that to be 5. I'm going to increase the spread a little bit, make it 8. Let's try something a bit stronger. Okay, this is how much, if you move this out, you'll see basically it's growing a little bit. Let's make this 3, and then I'm going to increase the size, which you can see here. Again, makes it sort of kick in a little bit. So let's make that 12. I'll just bring this one back to a reasonable sort of amount. Maybe let's try 8 on this one as well. And again here, let's go down a little bit. So that's creating, if I take preview on and off, just creating a little sense of depth. Now, I still quite like the hard edges, but if you don't want them, again, you could remove them and do that using some other technique, or you could shade it in Photoshop, etc. if you wanted a softer gradient. You could take these shadow areas, I'm just holding down Control, clicking on the thumbnail to select them. I can create a new adjustment level, for example, let's make it levels, where we could decide that we're not going to have any white, move it down like so. I'm dealing with a mask now, so if I hit Alt, you can see it in there. If I select these areas, I could actually put a gradient in. It's probably easier to do one at a time. So you can see I can put a gradient into there. That falls off a bit, or I could make the gradient, I think you can see it terribly well, I can make the gradient flow perpendicular to the angle. So you get a bit more intensity in the corner. Okay, it is probably easier if you're going to go this route to do one at a time. So this is what Photoshop shadow, and then I could copy that, step it across. So there's lots of techniques you could use if you wanted to soften these. Because these are actually masks, you can even feather them a little bit to soften them a bit further. And then if I move them behind the right elements, that one needs to go behind that one. And this one needs to go behind that one. You can see they work quite well. But I still kind of like, you could always combine both. I still kind of like the old-fashioned, slightly harder shadows myself in this context. Get them in exactly the right position, like so. Actually, it looks odd that this one's not quite right. It looks like I've nudged something somewhere where I shouldn't have. I think I need to move my center tab across a couple. There we go. So get them to where you're happy with. Okay, because I've created a layer style for that whole page, this before I did the shadows, I can right click, I can hit copy layer style and go to my next tab, and I can paste layer style slightly off screen. That puts the same layer style on the next tab, so I have the same drop shadow on it. Just pull this layer tab out, you can hopefully see it in the next one. Right click, screen resolution is a bit of a pain. Right click, paste layer style. Okay, so I've applied it to each one. It gives it depth. For my own money, sometimes I feel it's slightly overkill compared to Illustrator, but it's just a question of personal taste. Certainly that's looking pretty solid now. Obviously this icon's not right, but other than that, I've pretty much recreated it without the JPEG compression. The real reason that we did it in Illustrator, it's a bit like using Lego. It's an initial time investment. So is moving all the things and recreating all the layers in Photoshop. But now I can massively speed up the idea of sort of prototyping this. What if the second tab is now selected? I just have to change this page content element and switch which tab is highlighted. It's easy to do either in Photoshop or in Illustrator. So I can very rapidly now, while I've built the main screen, go through this and design how the app would work. Maybe these tabs move up later on in the app, up here. Again, very easy to do with vectors. So hopefully you've learned quite a lot. I will make this file available. I'll just save it so that you'll be able to look at the different ways we've done things. Again, you can look at the softer versus the harder shadows. They give a little bit more depth. You could also put gradients into here. The other option that many people might go for in terms of the layer style is you can also put like a highlight on it or a bevel and emboss. Now, personally, I kind of dislike this, but we could go in. We could have inner bevel. We can actually take out the entire emboss. So I don't want the shadow, but I could put an inner bevel on it. I could make it a lot smaller if I wanted a highlight along the top of there, and I can change its opacity, etc., so that I just get a bit of a highlight on the edge of that tab. And again, because that's a layer style, we can simply copy that layer style and then paste it over the other one to create the same effect on the next screen. Okay, I'll save that as well just in case you want that version. But you can see how quickly now I can work with this. So we started off, worked on it in Illustrator, got it up to a high standard, make sure everything's accurate, the right size. It saves us time later in Photoshop. If I tried to do this in Photoshop, there'd be no doubt in my mind that these tabs would probably be a different size, and they certainly wouldn't be equally balanced. You can do it in Illustrator, it's just a pain. There is alignment tools and many of the other features inside Photoshop, but Illustrator is just so much easier to do it in. Any of these elements now, if I want to change the page content, to remock it, clients give me feedback, I've got a spelling mistake, just double click, it launches in the new Illustrator window, make the changes, save it, boom, updates. It's a really powerful way of working with both Illustrator and Photoshop. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned a ton. Use Illustrator where Illustrator is sensible. Use Photoshop where Photoshop is great. Okay, enjoy yourself. Have fun.